Hey guys, how's it going? Happy Monday. It is Monday. Of course, it's technically my Tuesday, 'cause it's the second day of the week for me. I hope you guys are doing well and everyone's happy and healthy. I am tuning in again this week. I plan to tune in every day of the week with shorter lives instead of one longer live in the middle of the week. All about creating content for your social media. I'm talking about this because I recently made a content calendar just for bookkeepers. It's got 30 days of completely pre-written social media posts, and I have it for sale in the link in the description of this video. So of course, if that sounds interesting to you, go for it. But even if it doesn't, I want to be able to help you do that yourself. It's super helpful to have all of this content. That way you can post consistently, show up reliably for your customers, prove that you're an authority, all of those things, but you got to have the content to put online in order to do it. So there are things that you can do to help make that easier for you. Sorry, I did these notes with one of my markers, so now I'm waving that around like a baton. So for what it's worth. So I've been doing a lot of research on the psychological part of things. So I told you guys that I did a speed writing course recently, and whatever I learned in there, I'm happy to share with you guys. I'm actually really excited about it because I feel like it's confirming some of the things I'm doing right, which is fun, but it's also teaching me things that I could be doing better, which is really good too. I want to keep getting better at this stuff. And I'm always going to share what I learn with you. So one of the things I learned psychologically about when it comes to creating content is that it's really hard for you to start with a big, vague idea. So one of the things that I learned that I do right is that I don't start drafting blogs or social media content until I have a skeleton framework. So I'm going to go through the psychological reasons why you should have like a jumping off point before you start writing like a big meaty piece of content, even if it's like, a long social media post. And then also what I do, what you can easily do on your end in order to, I don't know, just learn how to use the optimal processes for your brain. It's good to understand how our bodies work in order to make the most of them. So yesterday I talked about this, how I like to use themes. And that actually is a really good thing because it breaks tasks down into subcategories. So I told you I have a monthly theme, and then I break that down into weekly sub themes, and then I have days of the week. So this actually is really good for your brain because when you think about I have to create a month's worth of social media posts, and that is all you see in your head. It is not actionable. It's too vague. Your brain can't get around it. You lock up. You come into writer's block. So you have to basically make a plan of attack, and that's exactly what this calendar does. So in the product, it's a template. It's a template for how to think about this stuff. So if you do purchase it, it's a way to understand how to organize that, how to break down those thoughts, how to make this more into bite-sized chunks. It matters for a couple of reasons on a psychological standpoint. One of them is implementation intention. So what you're doing is when you make decisions, when you make plans, you're engaging this part of your prefrontal cortex where all of your decision making, your logic, your writing goes on. When you give it a big vague task, it shuts down. It's just that's too hard, and your brain gets fatigued when making decisions, and when it comes up against a really big overwhelming decision or doing nothing, it'll choose to do nothing, like procrastination. So what you want to do in order to get things started is to make a plan. So for example, I do research, I do mind maps. So for example, instead of having just one big concept, I'll take research for the blogs, the social media posts, the calendar that I'm doing, and I'll break it down into something called mind maps. So you start with the central concept, and then you just start spidering off sub-thoughts from there. So for example, if this were the theme of the month, and these would be the weekly subtitles. But once again, it's just when I was drafting that calendar, of course I came down to 4 or 5 weekly topics. But I started out with a lot more subtopics than that and picked the best ones. But I had room to play around with it, but I had a plan. It's just okay, I need to make a big monster topic. How do I break this down into smaller topics? Okay, because the calendar is about The coronavirus. What are entrepreneurs dealing with the coronavirus? They're working from home. Okay, I can do, a week of content about that. No problem. And then once again, you can see how that like naturally drills down into a plan of attack. It makes things much more digestible. It's like, okay, I can do a week. No problem. So when you make a plan, implementation, intention is really important. Another thing that's interesting is I don't know about you guys, but it's just like I will procrastinate from like a task or a writing thing that I don't want to do as long as possible. And I'll be productively procrastinating. I'll be doing things that are, once again, aren't as painful, aren't as difficult. And that's your brain's way of saying, well, I'm still being productive, but I don't want to do this other thing that's hard to be productive. But something I have learned, and it's something that there's an actual writing strategy for, is this thing called the Zeigarnik effect. I'm probably saying it wrong. I have it written out in the description here because it's a weird word. So getting started is usually the hardest part, in part probably because it takes a lot of energy for our brains to switch tasks. It takes a lot of energy for us to go from one thing to the other. And that's something else I'd encourage you to do is batch your content. That's something I've talked about in the past because it's easier to write multiple posts and stay in the zone for a couple hours than write a post here and then like go back to the other task and finish the post that you're doing today. It's not how our brains are meant to work. So, but once you get started, once you get started, that is a good way to like kind of cross this barrier. The Zeigarnik effect is your brain doesn't like to start something and then stop it. Your brain, once it starts something, likes to finish it through. You do kind of have to push through that first point, though. Once you get to that first point, you're fine. So I've had times where I'll be writing something that like I'm not inspired, I'm not in a good mood, or it's just something that is more, it's content that I'm not as excited about. So I'll be avoiding it. And then I'll hit a wall or I'll try and sit down and do it and I just can't think of anything. So I'll just type anything. And that's something that this article I posted recently mentioned. I will type anything at all for like 10 minutes. That's kind of, and I'll type swear words, I'll type anything to get things started sometimes. And once you write long enough, something comes out of it. Your brain kind of clicks over. I felt that in myself multiple times where it's just like, I'll push through whatever it was and get into the Zeigarnik effect. It's like, oh, I've started this. Oh, I have something to work on. So for example, something that I really liked, Hemingway used it in a way, I don't even know if he knew what it was called. He had a habit of when he would finish, writing for the day, he would leave it in the middle of a sentence. So what he did is he made it as easy as possible for him to pick up the thought the following day. He already knew where he was going. And that's also something like he was getting ahead of decision fatigue. He was making it as easy as possible for him to start the next day, to start that flow, to get into this Zeigarnik effect. And to really just like use that motivation. So yeah, plan out your attack before writing content. Like I said, I have the calendar broken down into a monthly theme, a weekly sub theme, and then like days of the week. And that really helps me have like a skeleton. I keep saying skeleton, something to build on. It's a lot harder for our brains to process, the complexity of creative thoughts. But if you give it a starting place, that's better. Like if you're able to outline things a day beforehand and then come back to it the following day. There's even research that creative writing, like your drafting or your brainstorming, is done better in the morning. And that once your brain is more settled down later in the day, that's a better time to do editing and like polishing, things of that nature. So you will probably spend a couple days writing stuff, and that's okay. Just try and make sure that you get past these points. This is how your brain works when it comes to writing. So some of the ways that you can do this and that I use as far as like, my skeleton tools, I guess is how I call them. I know that bookkeepers really like checklists. It's easy to write a list. So for example, when I'm writing a sales post, there are certain elements that I need to include in every sales post. So I literally have a checklist from someone else I respect. She talked about like the elements of a successful sale post, and so like I just have something like this that I can refer to. It's like talk about their pain, so, someone's pain points. Um, Give them clear steps on how you can help them solve it, give them a clear call to action. And this helps me get past writer's block when it comes to sales posts. I have an outline, I know what to include in it. It makes it less vague, makes it specific, and gets it into that implementation intention stage for your prefrontal cortex. Makes it a lot easier, a lot less calories burned, I think is how it goes. Another thing you could do is go back old school to high school. Think about how they used to teach you how to write essays. It's just like you start with an introduction paragraph, see where the camera is, everything's backwards. You break it down into 3 points and body paragraphs, and you come to a conclusion. It's a simple outline, but it works, and I've used that before. It's just like, okay, what's the point I'm trying to make? What are the points that I need to back it up, the evidence, things of that nature. So like for social media, it would be like a testimonial, it would be a picture, it would be whatever. But it's a plan, it's a skeleton to build on. I'm not starting my ideas from scratch. I know where I'm going, I know the structure, I have a skeleton to put meat on the bones. Another thing I like to do is I refer back to like my old things. You get good ideas. It's just like, oh, this is how I organized it. Or you can look up templates. So you look up what other people have written. It's like, oh, so they organized their blog in this way. They broke out their social media this way. Another thing I talk about in the calendar, and that helps you, and that also helps me drill things down from a checklist perspective, is there's like a balance. So like, let me get this in the video. So I always say there's like an 80-20 balance between sales posts and personal and value posts, because you want people to know what you're offering, how you can help them, but you also just want to help them for free. And when you have all of these elements laid out for yourself, this checklist, okay, I need X number of sales posts this month. I need, every Tuesday is going to be about like a live and stuff like that. It gives you an actionable list. It keeps it from being vague, and it breaks it down into clear steps. So for example, like when I've been writing these content calendars in the past, I'll sometimes stick with a certain theme. Like I'll have a day just for doing sales posts because I'm in the groove. And it's harder for me to switch into the mindset of, like personal posts, things of that nature. So try and batch the tasks. Try and do as many tasks as you can for this at once. Because it's just hard for your brain to switch tasks. You can't just like, it's hard to write a post every single day because it takes this energy to go up from here and then go over here. Yeah, our brains aren't meant for, like 18 notifications 400 times a day. But yeah, so I keep learning more about the psychology of messaging, mostly to the effect of how we can understand our brains better in order to do it better. To make it less stressful, to make it go faster. And once again, I would encourage you, before you start drafting anything, it's like make a plan of attack, draw an outline up, draw a checklist. I want to communicate, these 3 services to my clients. I want to make sure that they're informed about these 5 things that are going on, with bookkeeping and loans right now. Just make sure you really break it down beforehand, because it's so much easier to build off of that. It's so much easier for your brain. It's so much less stressful. And of course, you can edit the outline as you go. But having a plan, having that foot in the door, having that unfinished sentence like Hemingway makes a big difference. So anyways, that's what I got for today. Trying to keep it short-ish, but I hope you guys have a good day. And I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Okay? Bye.